The days of the Gamecube were a transitional vortex for me. Many of its games were released at a time where I was beginning to appreciate their finer aspects without losing any of that childish enthusiasm and wonder. Yet amongst these still formative years in my video gaming journey, there are a couple of adventures that have slipped to the bottom of my mind's inventory. One of which I haven't played since 2008. I gotta stop neglecting these games, man. So, with some nostalgia safely bottled up and tucked away, let's revisit the land of Hyrule and go on a less lonely journey. Released in the summer of 2004, The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventure swam in the wake of its much-celebrated relative, The Wind Waker. With a continuation of the top-down style and subtle flourishes of its own, it was another grand adventure in the Zelda franchise. Yet it was also a departure from the other games in the series, bringing its own sense of style and charm. Controlling 4 links, collecting gems, multiplayer. These are some foreign facets for our colorfully capped combatants. It's awesome then that controlling 4 links isn't intrusive at all. To switch between their formations, a simple flick of the C-stick will do the trick, or you can hold the L trigger and move the control stick. Complicated stuff, I know. Either way feels intuitive when you hold the controller and makes for quick, precise changes in formation. And these different lineups all serve their purposes. Stack up to push that massive block or pull that heavy chain. Move into a square to press that switch and keep compact moving through tight corridors. Or, best of all, switch to the diamond and spin so fast that I'm amazed they all don't vomit simultaneously as a result. You have a fantastic amount of versatility between each formation, and this makes it both exciting to take on new challenges and a relief that something so integral isn't tedious. While controlling them together is a blast, directing one Link at a time feels equally intuitive. In these situations, Link controls just as he would in any of the other top-down Zelda games, so there's never a jarring transition. And sure, controlling 4 Links at once is awesome, cause, well, duh, 4 times the swords, 4 times the power. But there are times where trying to maneuver around with 4 Links is going to be tricky. As a result, this mechanic of splitting up the links and controlling them individually can help to get you past obstacles that would normally be a big challenge. For example, you see that insurmountable gap? Instead of standing around like an idiot, pick up and throw one of your brethren to the other side. That way you can hit a switch or whatever you gotta do to be on your way. Or how about that pest, Dark Link? Always hopping around like an idiot. Well, let's use our powers to trick him. No matter what, he'll jump away before you can get a strike in. However, if you use this helpful ability, you can place 2 links in either of the spots he'll land in. Switch between links as he leaps back to one of the spots and he'll be reduced to pocket change. Speaking of collectible bits of currency, the 4 Swords' strength is derived from these Force Gems. Littered throughout each stage are many sizes and colors of these precious jewels. While it's not integral that you gather every last one, you'd better collect 2,000 before you reach the end of the stage. Otherwise, you won't have enough power to shatter the barrier. Luckily for us, though, acquiring 2,000 gems is no problem. Through a bit of delving here and there, you'll reveal a healthy amount of sword fuel, while other times slaying a mob of enemies or destroying some of the landscape will result in a jamboree of jewels pouring out of the sky or fountaining out of the ground. While having a number you have to reach might seem tedious, I scoured the levels from top to bottom and regularly had more than enough by the time I reached the end. So, even if you're not terribly inclined to explore, there's more than enough gems out there to get the 2,000 you need. And besides, it makes you more powerful if you do reach that goal, giving you the ability to dish out a hearty dose of Blade Beam Fury at full health. While progression can be halted if you lack the strength to eradicate the barrier, advancing through the game's areas feels quite satisfying. That sounds pretty straightforward, but it's the manner in which you progress that ends up differentiating itself from the other Zelda titles. Instead of exploring a large hub and branching out to more distinct locations from there, this game actually follows a level-by-level approach. In fact, it's more or less separated into arcs, each one made up of 3 levels. Starting out far away from a region's temple, the first area will be a bit more open with more enemies trying to take you down. While it isn't devoid of puzzles, it's definitely the easiest section, giving you a taste for what's to come. The second mission will ramp up the difficulty a bit, throwing more challenging puzzles and environmental hazards your way. Then you reach the 3rd stage, and it's time to tackle the temple. This is just as you'd expect. Tricky puzzles, tough battles, and a more intimidating atmosphere. And all the while, the environment changes and progresses to match this rise in difficulty. Starting out in the lush foothills of Death Mountain, it's not long before you're lumbering through steeper, rockier terrain. Then after all the trials you've faced, you finally break through the clouds and reach the summit, with the temple, that one final obstacle, just around the corner. There's an enjoyable level of progression as you travel through the regions of Hyrule. However, this is also where the gameplay starts to separate itself further from its more significant siblings. In your standard Zelda questline, you find heart pieces and new items that make you more powerful. Fighting some of these items requires you venture off the intended route, rewarding you for exploring. 4 Swords still follows this general idea, but the way in which it implemented it is quite interesting. Seeing as you control 4 links, your ability to take on challenges is quite open from the start. But as a result of having all this utility so early on, you're also quite limited. limited. And by that I mean you literally don't have an inventory in this game. This means that any item you pick up is all you can have on you at one time. While your adventure is stocked with all the classics, bombs, boomerang, magic hammer, you'll have to carefully consider what to use and switch between items as you move through each level. Now, I don't mind this. The game's structure and progression alongside how Link and his brothers control makes for an experience that is quite arcade-like, especially when compared to the series as a whole. You have to plan accordingly for all the tasks you'll face, and with 4 Links being so capable, it makes sense to limit them in some way. Luckily, switching items is not only quick, but by the time you need to make a change, the next item will always be somewhere nearby. This takes away any unnecessary tedium from backtracking that would otherwise make this mechanic a pain. Likewise, the game also limits how much health you can have at any given time. As a result, you'll always start a level with 4 hearts, 1 for each Link. Then, if you carefully explore the levels, you just might stumble upon a heart container or 2, increasing your health for the duration of that stage. Now, the progression through any 3-level arc is great, and I understand the philosophy behind curtailing your health this way. But I don't see why heart containers couldn't have stayed with us throughout the stages leading up to saving a maiden. Item switching works because it's designed around the levels, but if we're working past increasingly difficult challenges, shouldn't players be rewarded for taking the extra time to explore and find a heart container? For as great as the progression feels, it would have been enhanced further if you got to the temple with 8 or 9 hearts in hand rather than being reduced to 4. I mean, come on, the beginning of the next level looks just like the end of the area I just completed. How can I have lost those hearts? Despite this minor annoyance, it's also great that levels are quite long. Depending on how much you explore and how well you know the levels, they can take anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour to complete. Altogether, this results in a main story mode that can last anywhere between 10 to 15 hours. It's such a shame that despite all its good qualities, Four Swords Adventures didn't do too well, limping to just a few 100,000's worth of sales numbers between the US and Japan. And it should have sold well. I mean, come on, it's freaking Zelda. I can only imagine people saw the ad campaigns touting it as a multiplayer experience requiring a Game Boy Advance and a cable to play it and thought, nah, too much work. Bold strategy, Nintendo, but one gimmick at a time. It's especially disappointing when you look at how much detail and polish was put into it. The game wasn't treated any differently to other titles of the time, and it shows. Clouds painting shadows across the Hyrulean landscape, Wind Waker-inspired dying animations and explosions, nicely animated and detailed sprites. All of this adds a lot of vibrancy to what could have otherwise been a pretty bland world. And this game shouldn't have had any right standing amongst other games of the series, yet instead it has all the character we've come to expect. It's a bright, spirited experience that will not only challenge you in new ways, but leave you having a whole lot of fun in the process. It's just too bad about those GBA cables.